Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Metal Warriors. In the last part, we went to the secret stage, and now it's time to end things off. This is the big one, folks. The Axis Central Command lies directly below us. Captain Stone's group will be leading the attack. Intelligence has it that the enemy is trying to build a super weapon. Your job is to get inside and knock out this super weapon if it does exist. Alright, the final mission has, good luck, Stone, a good bit of similarity to missions 6 and the secret mission, in that there's going to be quite a few times where the screen will fade to black and you're going to get essentially times to get a checkpoint. Starting off, this is easily the most dangerous stage in the game. There are enemies everywhere and a lot of traps just ready to damage you and do a lot of damage quickly. This little descent here at the start especially is just armed to the teeth, with cannons, mines, and the occasional just standard mech. Though I do want to come over here really quickly, because first off it allows me to take out this mech suit and it just makes me feel better. But there's also an item box below him that contains a gravity reverse, at least in my case. I think this is one of those that's random, but trust me, this is one of the very few opportunities you outright want a gravity reversal, due to a portion later on in this section. I'll tell you when we get there. But you really want to stagger your fall using the jets, because that way you can easily sneak up on these cannons and get some damage on them pretty quickly. And you want to, after you take care of that first one, head over here to this one on the far right, take care of it, and then take care of the others from behind. That way you can just save yourself as much damage as possible. Be careful of the energy beam though, because that does hurt. And before you head to the right, rather, after taking care of all the cannons, head to the left of the one on the far left, because there's a health box there for you. Trust me, you're going to need as much health as you can get in this stage. Because you're stuck with the Nitro in particular as like your only mech suit option for a good while. Use your drop shields when you can, and use your actual shield if you ever need to. Play defensively. It's the best advice I can give for this final stage. Also, up here we got a couple of other boxes. I think one of these is always a bounce shot, and the other one's a random sub-weapon. I'd rather keep the anti-grav, thank you. The bounce shot is powerful, but what it has in power, it lacks, in my eyes, in usability, honestly. Because due to its bounce, it's very unreliable to hit things with. And these cannons in particular are some of the most annoying things in the game to hit, because you really need to be careful about where you're placing your shot and your drop shield. This is why I wanted you to keep the anti-grav machine, because then you can just stand here and take care of this cannon, and then move on to the next section without having to mash the B button over and over again. You don't need it, but it's recommended. I will take this over the bounce shot. I think what makes this stage admittedly hard is the combination of just a lot of enemies that do a lot of damage really quickly, explosion, lingering effects that will do damage, very cramped spaces which doesn't allow for much dodging of said damage, and the occasional crusher, because the first portion of this stage, because there's two notable halves of the stage, the first half is what we're in right now, is full of crushers, and that's no good. Especially if you forget they're there during your test playthrough and fly right up as one's moving to the right, crushing you against a wall and killing you. Fun. Thankfully, if you're playing along, I no longer need to fear death in the game, because you already got the secret stage and you saw it, so you can die freely, just don't get a game over. Alright, now this section's a bit annoying in that there's a ton of passageways that are blocked off that I don't think there's a way to unlock. So you just need to find the proper pathway. I think there's one to the left and to the right. I think the one to the left allows you to keep your nitro, But I'm gonna head to the right because that way I can just gain a Havoc and avoid a lot of enemies. Because I like the Havoc. In fact, honestly, in terms of this stage, I like the Havoc more because, yeah, I lose out on the flying, but I gain on the faster walking thanks to the little boost gears it has. Which actually reminds me a lot of the nightmares from Code Geass. I really need to watch the new thing of that's gonna happen, apparently. Once you've gotten this far in, you're past most of the danger of the first half. And the Havoc is really good for getting past this. Though, I can also recommend the Havoc, the Nitro rather, if you can keep it. If there's even a way to keep it. I think the way to the left allows you to keep it. For the next section, because flight would be useful. But over here, good job, Captain Stone. You found the entrance to the underground base. Welcome to the Axis Core, which is the literal core of the Axis operations. Who knew? This is the most dangerous portion in the game. There is death everywhere, crushing, mines, damage. It's dangerous. It's very easy to get tense here due to that. You want to save the box to my right for a little bit, because that contains health, and you might need some after the early stuff. Because this next room in particular is quite the crowded room. There's a plasma launcher on the top of the screen firing down that potentially one-shot kill plasma beam. There's some mine throwers to the right. There's also some seeker shot shooters, and there's just a standard mech. This room is crowded, and it's very easy to take damage in. Thankfully, the way these weird seeker missile shooters work is that one of them won't open if you're like right next to it, so you can at least abuse that fact. Or at least they won't open as often as I just saw. I'm going to save that switch over there until after I've taken care of actively every threat in the room. Though I am going to head to the left and grab that health at this point, just because I've taken care of most of the threats to the Havoc. Is just one threat to the person that I want to take care of. Also, you'll occasionally see me dance to the music in this game if you haven't noticed it. It's kind of nausea-inducing because the camera shifts to the left and the right, so that you're always on the farthest third of the screen, I believe it is. And that can be a bit nauseating happening over and over again. I'll take that missile launcher. That's supposed to be health. Oh, wait, no. Rather. Sorry. I'm thinking of the box later on. That's one of the random ones. However, the missile launcher is also rather preferable to get just to get some rid of some enemies a bit more easily later on. I think I'm thinking of, like, the next box. I do like how they handle the difficulty curve in this game, though, because even though I think some of the later levels are a bit too much of a spike compared to what came before, the way they actively handle that by just making the areas narrower to fit the mechs in and such fits more with a base, and it kind of works. Oh, that guy respawns. That's why you want to play as this dude up here, the Havoc, because otherwise that guy might respawn and take it, and then you did. Yeah, there's the health box. I was thinking of that one. This portion is a bit tedious, mostly just because you're waiting over and over again for the platforms to move left and right. They don't even really stand much of a threat of crushing you here. It's just that you have to wait for them over and over again to be able to progress. Though if you miss your jump, that one could crush you. And here we see a prime case of pain-in-the-ass enemy spawning. Because I spawned that enemy on screen, it's now actively trying to attack me. Fun. I'm not entirely sure if the speedrun ever uses that to its advantage, spawning an enemy in late or early just to do things with it. It probably does, but even though I watched it, I wasn't paying too much attention to it, if that makes sense. Seeker shot is preferable to most other shot types at this point, just because that way you can just stay on the defensive some more. The biggest pain in the ass, probably, with this stage, even though there is a checkpoint halfway through, as we saw, is that you still have to do a good amount again if you die. Like, I think if you die after the descent at the beginning of the first portion of the stage, you have to do it all over again, and that is a particularly sucky section to have to redo. We're probably coming up on what's the most easy to get hit in section of the stage. Because there's this giant crusher to our left that we need to jump all around. Whoa, okay, that was a bit nerve-wracking. A giant crusher moving left and right that there's some holes in that we need to get into, and oh boy. And what's nerve-wracking about that isn't the fact that we have to get into the crusher itself, but there are some enemies at the key points we need to jump in and out of that are very hard to avoid if at all possible. Like this, yeah, I could block the shots of this turret, but why bother right now, right? I think you can actually get past certain shields if the shots, or rather the enemies and you, can shoot over and under certain shields depending on what mech it is. Because I can definitely do that to Havocs. They can probably do it to me too because of that. And we're out of that section. Into another pretty nerve-wracking section, now that I think about it. Because we have a giant vertical section filled with enemies coming up. Thankfully, I'm going to end up finding a gravity reversal that'll make getting around the area a bit more easy rather. And there's a health restoration coming up, so I don't have to worry too much. I do like that they at least place health restorations because they know you're going to be taking a good bit of damage in this game. Especially in sections when you only have the one mech choice. And up we go. Just make sure to reverse gravity responsibly because you might end up falling right into some plasma shooter or into a mine that could do a good bit of damage. Take another health. I do appreciate, by the way, I'm like mentioning it, that they decided to show your HP bar through more of a graphical thing than a actual health bar. It's pretty unique for the era in that regard, I think. What do we got here? I'll take that. You don't need to take care of all the enemies at this point onwards because there's a good bit of movement options around for you, at least for right now. In the next little section is going to be a bit more crowding going on. These treads in particular are what end up narrowing your course enough to the point where you need to worry about actively taking out enemies. Once we're past this, though, we're just about at the final boss. There's only one more set of enemies and a cannon, as well as one last little restock point for you, which is really good, and there's something there that some people will debatably like being there. We'll talk about that more in a moment. First off, behind this cannon on the platform behind it, there's going to be a level 3 bullet, which can be very useful for the final boss if you decide to use it. Now you might be wondering, well, if I'm going to use it, why wouldn't I? Or rather, if it's there, why wouldn't I use it, right? There's one key reason why you might not want to use it, and it has to do with what's down here. You can see it right there. There's a Prometheus. Depending on who you are, you might prefer to fight the final boss with the Havoc or the Prometheus. I prefer to fight it with the Prometheus, but if you want to use the Havoc, get that level 3 shot and get the health directly to the right of the Prometheus if you're low on health, or actually, no, just to top off in general, rather, and you can go right on in. Even though it makes me a sitting target, I prefer the Prometheus for the final boss. And I guess getting a gravity reverse isn't awful. My reasoning due to this is with how the final boss works. The Prometheus's X attack, the weird little aerial mines, are very powerful and very useful against the boss. So if you're going to use the Prometheus, I recommend using that strategy, but be warned, this is a bit more dangerous. It's faster if you do it correctly, but it's dangerous. Prepare to meet your maker. Final boss of the game is the super weapon, piloted, I think, by who's supposed to be the leader of the Axis, Amon. This thing has several phases. The first one, it'll just move left and right, swinging its little ball and chain around. By using the Prometheus's missiles and the aerial mines correctly, you can take care of that no problem, though the ball will roll across screen in precise ways. At that point, it'll just start flying left and right, shooting its little beam cannon at you, while also spawning weird little options that are basically funnels from Gundam to shoot more bullets at you. If it's above you, it'll drop missiles down on you that do a lot of damage. So that's the thing you need to watch out for most. Whenever it's high on the screen, be careful of where it is. In fact, be careful of being below it in general. The more damage you do to it, the more damaged it looks, and I think the fewer attacks it starts to have options to. Eventually it'll lose the ability to use its beam cannon, then it'll just be the missiles, then it'll lose the missiles. This thing has a lot of health, but if you use the Prometheus or Havoc smartly, you can do this easily. Just be careful, because dying here, if I'm recalling correctly, sends you all the way back to be the beginning of the section. And I might not, I'll flip gravity. I honestly think this thing might have a bit too much health, but at the same time, I'm a bit happy whenever I see this thing because it reminds me of Big Zam and a couple of other Gundam things. This entire game reminds me of Gundam and Star Wars, obviously. The thing you really want to be careful of, though, aside from losing your health and therefore your weapon and just basically being screwed at this point, is when it starts getting very low on health. In fact, when the bottom skirt is basically completely destroyed, it'll start jumping up and down on the floor and occasionally shooting. And when it does this, you can get destroyed by it jumping on you very easily, almost in one shot. When it gets destroyed, jump out and start jumping out of your mech and then start flying. You may have destroyed the Axis forces, but you will never stop me. Because at that point, Venkar will eject from the mech, and you have to do a minor chase sequence. However, if you're smart about getting out of time, you can actually get ahead of him. And at this point, there's no real threat. If you're following behind him, though, you want to stay a bit of a safe distance away, because he will shoot at you if you're within a certain distance. You're supposed to use the tunnels and the gaps in the bridges to get around him effectively. And then you get to this nitro at the end, and then you just fly upwards, at which point, that is game. And that's Metal Warriors. I think this is a really, really interesting game. While it has some shortfalls, like I think the soundtrack's a bit forgettable, the stages can get a bit weird in difficulty spikes, and I think overall some of the stages blend together a bit too much. The overall game is very impressive for Super Nintendo standards. It controls excellently, it looks amazing. The sound design, barring the soundtrack, is really good. There's just a lot to like about this game. I think they could have done with a bit more of unique missions or certain other minor elements being refined a bit, but what we got here is fantastic. If you want to play it, though, it was only ever released on the Super Nintendo. I don't think this ever got a Virtual Console release, but I can recommend it. Just be careful getting physical copies, because some of them are cheap, some of them aren't. And something I should mention that I haven't mentioned yet is that there is a two-player mode. You get it for being in the game anyway. It's in the main menu, and it's identified as like question marks mode. But you can also unlock it by holding certain buttons at the title screen. I think you need both controllers. Player 1 needs to hold the left, the L shoulder button, and A, and controller 2 needs to hold up, Y, select, and R, at which point it'll appear automatically. It's a bit of a fun mode, but not too in-depth. Which, honestly, in a way, kind of describes the game. But with that, I'm going to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great night. Take care. And I'll see you guys next Let's Play, whatever that may be. See you guys then.